Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek killed the same actor off 4 different times. Science fiction has always thrived on the strange, the cyclical, and the improbable. Yet sometimes, the quirkiest stories aren't in the scripts but in the casting. Both Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek, two of the most influential sci-fi franchises ever created, shared an odd habit. They kept killing off the same actor again and again. The performer in question is John Colicos, a veteran stage and screen star whose commanding voice, piercing eyes, and theatrical presence made him perfect for genre television. Colicos wasn't just an actor who happened to drop into both universes, he was a cornerstone villain. In Star Trek, he introduced audiences to the Klingons, setting the tone for decades of Federation Klingon politics. In Battlestar Galactica, he became the ultimate betrayer, Baltar, whose treachery nearly destroyed humanity. And in both franchises, the writers seemed to love killing him almost as much as casting him. Across 4 different appearances, 2 in Star Trek and 2 in Battlestar Galactica, Colicos' characters met dramatic, often explosive deaths. It became a running, if unintentional, theme. If John Colicos showed up in your sci-fi story, he wasn't going to survive for long. So let's look at how Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica killed John Colicos 4 separate times, and why his on-screen deaths became such a curious pattern in the history of television science fiction. John Colicos, the man behind the deaths. Before diving into the franchises, it's worth remembering who John Colicos was. Born in Toronto in 1928, Colicos trained as a Shakespearean actor, honing his booming voice and dramatic presence on stage before moving into television and film. By the 1960s, he had carved out a niche in both villainous and authoritative roles. What made him so magnetic for science fiction is that he could project both nobility and menace at the same time. He didn't just twirl his mustache, he gave his villains depth, conviction, and passion. Audiences could believe that his characters thought they were the heroes of their own stories. That's why Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica kept coming back to him, even as they repeatedly scripted his death. Death 1, Kor in Star Trek, the original series. Colicos' most famous sci-fi role came in 1967 with Star Trek, the original series episode Errand of Mercy. Cast as Kor, the first Klingon commander ever shown on screen, Colicos created the blueprint for an alien culture that would grow into one of the most enduring legacies of Star Trek. Kor was cunning, ruthless, but also strangely honorable. Unlike many one-off villains of the time, Kor wasn't cartoonish. He respected Captain Kirk even as he sought to conquer Organia. Colicos, famously, worked with the makeup team to tone down the original alien prosthetics, instead insisting the Klingons should feel human but driven by a militaristic code. In that first appearance, Kor doesn't technically die. The Organians intervene, preventing war. However, Colicos returned to voice Kor in Star Trek, the animated series in the 1970s, where his Klingon did meet a grisly fate in The Time Trap. In that story, Kor is left stranded with his crew, doomed to a slow death when their ship is marooned. It was a foreboding first death for Colicos in Trek, but it would hardly be the last. Death 2, Kor's final stand in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. Decades later, Colicos was invited back to reprise his role as Kor in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. Unlike most TOS guest stars, Colicos' character wasn't rebooted or rewritten. He was Kor, aged but still the same cunning Klingon warrior. His return began in the episode Blood Oath, where Kor joined fellow Klingon legends Kang and Koloth, also returning from TOS on a mission of vengeance. Fans were thrilled to see Colicos back, as it gave a sense of continuity and respect for Trek's history. Kor appeared in several DS9 episodes, but his death came in once more into the breach. Here, the elderly Klingon struggles with his fading skills and a sense that he no longer belongs in a warrior's world. Yet in one final blaze of glory, Kor sacrifices himself by taking command of a ship on a suicide mission against the Dominion. His death is both heroic and tragic, an old soldier proving his worth one last time. For Colicos, it was the ultimate send-off in Star Trek. His character, who had defined Klingons for decades, died a warrior's death. That was Death 2. Death 3. Baltar in Battlestar Galactica 1978. If Kor made Kolikos a legend in Star Trek, it was Baltar who cemented him as a fixture of sci-fi villainy. In Glenn A. Larson's original Battlestar Galactica, Baltar is the human traitor who sells out humanity to the robotic Cylons. Kolikos Baltar is not the suave manipulator of the 2004 reimagining. He is a snarling, operatic villain reveling in betrayal. In the 1978 pilot, Baltar is promised rulership of his colony in exchange for helping the Cylons destroy the human fleet. But once his treachery is complete, the Cylons betray him in turn, sentencing him to death. In the theatrical cut of the pilot, which played in cinemas before the show's broadcast, Baltar is executed by the Cylons almost immediately after the destruction of the colonies. It's swift, ironic justice, the traitor betrayed by his new allies. Of course, TV executives quickly realized Kolikos was too good to waste. For the televised version of the series, Baltar was spared and kept alive as an ongoing villain. But in that first version of events, Kolikos died his third death in science fiction. Death-4. Baltar again in Galactica 1980. If Baltar's life was spared to keep him around, it was only a temporary reprieve. By the time of Galactica 1980, the short-lived spin-off, Kolikos was once again brought back and once again killed off. In this odd continuation, humanity had found Earth and Baltar was still scheming in the background. But the character was abruptly written out, finally executed for his crimes. Unlike the ambiguous survival of some sci-fi villains, Baltar's fate here was sealed. Kolikos' signature role in Battlestar Galactica ended with death. It was the second time the character had been executed, and the fourth time Kolikos had died across these two universes. By then, it had become almost a meta joke. Put John Kolikos in your show, and you'd better start planning the funeral. Why did they keep killing him? So why did both Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica repeatedly kill John Kolikos' characters? Part of it is simply storytelling. Both franchises thrived on high stakes, and Kolikos' larger-than-life performances demanded larger-than-life exits. Killing Kor or Baltar gave the audience catharsis. They had seen a towering villain or warrior meet an equally towering end. But part of it may also be that Kolikos had the rare talent to make a death feel meaningful. Some actors vanish from the screen and the audience shrugs. Kolikos made his departures memorable. Whether it was Kor dying a hero's death in DS9 or Baltar being betrayed by the Cylons, Kolikos could imbue those scenes with weight, tragedy, and drama. It wasn't just about losing a character, it felt like losing a presence. The legacy of Kolikos' deaths. Looking back, it's strange to think that the same actor was written off 4 times in 2 different universes. And yet, those deaths have only heightened his legacy. Fans still debate whether Baltar should have lived longer, or whether Kor's DS9 exit was the greatest Klingon send-off in Trek history. Kolikos himself seemed amused by it. In interviews, he acknowledged how much he enjoyed chewing the scenery as both Kor and Baltar, and he understood that dying well on screen was part of what made those roles iconic. Today, when fans think of Klingons, Kolikos' Kor is still the archetype. When they think of Ba,